The next morning, Lucy woke up earlier than usual and immediately asked her father if they could visit Zara again. Jake had planned to spend the day reviewing trade agreements, but something in his daughter's eager expression made him change his plans. He decided that the paperwork could wait and agreed to visit the refugee ship after breakfast. Lucy practically bounced with excitement as they made their way through the station corridors. She had spent the previous evening asking Jake dozens of questions about Zara and the refugees that he could not answer. The child's curiosity about their new acquaintances seemed endless, and Jake found himself curious too. When they arrived at the refugee ship, they found Zara helping to organize a makeshift school for the children. She had cleared a small space in one of the cargo areas and was using an old data pad to show the kids pictures of different planets and star systems. The children sat in a circle around her, listening intently as she explained how different worlds had different gravity and atmospheres. Lucy immediately joined the circle and began asking Zara about the pictures. Zara welcomed her warmly and included her in the lesson without missing a beat. Jake watched from the doorway as his daughter interacted with the refugee children and marveled at how quickly kids could become friends regardless of their circumstances. What impressed Jake most was how naturally Zara taught the children. She had a gift for explaining complex concepts in simple terms that even the youngest kids could understand. When one little boy asked why some planets were red and others were blue, Zara used examples from their daily lives to help him grasp the basic principles of atmospheric composition. After the impromptu lesson ended, Lucy asked Zara if she wanted to see the human section of the station. Zara looked uncertain about leaving the refugee ship, but several of the adults encouraged her to go. They pointed out that she had been working non-stop since their arrival and deserved a break. The three of them explored the human quarters together, with Lucy serving as an enthusiastic tour guide. She showed Zara the recreation area where humans gathered to play games and watch entertainment programs from Earth. Lucy explained that her father had set up movie nights every week where they watched old Earth films that made everyone feel homesick. Zara seemed fascinated by the way the human section was organized. She asked thoughtful questions about how decisions were made and how conflicts were resolved. Jake explained that they operated more like a large family than a military unit, with everyone contributing according to their abilities and sharing resources when needed. When they reached the small library, Lucy proudly showed Zara her favorite books. She had read most of the children's stories multiple times and could recite several from memory. Zara listened patiently as Lucy told her the plot of each book in great detail. Jake noticed that Zara never seemed bored or impatient with Lucy's chatter. Most adults started looking for escape routes after 10 minutes of 8-year-old conversation, but Zara appeared genuinely interested in everything Lucy had to say. She asked follow-up questions and made comments that showed she was really listening. The library, Zara discovered several scientific journals that made her face light up with interest. She explained to Jake that she had been a xenobiologist before the war, studying how different species could work together peacefully. Her research had focused on finding common ground between species that seemed incompatible. Jake found himself drawn into conversation with Zara about her work. She spoke passionately about the potential for cooperation between different forms of life, and her belief that understanding usually led to friendship. Her optimism was refreshing after years of dealing with the political maneuvering that dominated station life. Lucy asked Zara to explain what a xenobiologist did, and Zara patiently described how she studied alien life forms to understand their needs and behaviors. She told Lucy that every species had something valuable to contribute, and that learning about differences made everyone stronger. As they talked, Jake began to see a different side of Zara. The desperate refugee who had approached him yesterday was actually a highly educated scientist with valuable skills and knowledge. The war had stripped away her position and possessions, but it had not touched her intelligence or her passion for her work. When they stopped for lunch in the human section's small cafeteria, several of Jake's crew members joined them. Zara answered their questions about the refugee situation with grace and honesty. She did not complain about their circumstances or blame others for their problems, but simply explained what had happened and what they hoped to do next. The crew members were impressed by Zara's composure and her obvious intelligence. One of them mentioned that the station's research department was always looking for qualified scientists and suggested that Zara might find work there. Zara's eyes lit up at the possibility, but she said her first priority was helping the other refugees get settled. After lunch, Lucy insisted on showing Zara her bedroom and her collection of drawings. She had filled several notebooks with pictures of the aliens she had met and the ships she had seen docking at the station. Zara studied each drawing carefully and praised Lucy's attention to detail. Jake watched as Zara and Lucy looked through the notebooks together. His daughter was clearly smitten with their new friend and hung on every word Zara said. It had been a long time since Jake had seen Lucy so animated and happy around an adult other than himself. When Zara saw a drawing Lucy had made of her late mother, she grew very quiet. Lucy explained that her mother had died when she was very young and that she drew pictures to help remember her. Zara listened with tears in her eyes and told Lucy that her mother would be very proud of the kind and smart girl she had become. The afternoon passed quickly as the three of them talked and explored the human section together. Zara had a natural curiosity about everything and asked intelligent questions about how the station operated. Jake found himself explaining policies and procedures that he usually took for granted as evening approached. It became clear that Zara needed to return to the refugee ship. The other survivors depended on her for communication with station officials and coordination of their daily needs. She thanked Jake and Lucy for spending the day with her and said it had been the best day she had experienced since leaving her. Homeworld Lucy made Zara promise to visit again soon and gave her one of her drawings as a gift. Zara accepted the drawing with obvious pleasure and promised to hang it in her sleeping area on the refugee ship. Jake could see that the gesture meant a great deal to both of them. Walking back to their quarters after saying goodbye to Zara, Jake reflected on the day they had spent together. He had expected to feel sorry for the refugees and had planned to help them as much as his resources allowed. What he had not expected was to find himself genuinely enjoying Zara's company and looking forward to seeing her again. Lucy chattered excitedly about all the things she wanted to show Zara and all the questions she still wanted to ask. Jake listened to his daughter's plans and realized that Zara had somehow become important to both of them in just 2 days. That night, as he tucked Lucy into bed, she asked if Zara could come to their weekly movie night. Jake promised to invite her and saw Lucy's face light up with happiness. As he turned off the lights, Jake found himself looking forward to seeing Zara again and wondering what other surprises she might have in store. The crisis began on a Tuesday morning when Jake received an emergency communication from the station's medical center. Dr. Klein, the chief medical officer, reported that several alien species had begun falling ill with symptoms that defied explanation. What made the situation particularly alarming was that the affected species had completely different biologies and should not have been susceptible to the same pathogens. Within hours, the number of sick aliens had doubled. The medical center was overwhelmed as beings from 7 different species arrived with similar symptoms, including fever, weakness, and respiratory distress. Dr. Klein had never seen anything like it, and his staff was struggling to understand how such diverse life forms could be affected by the same illness. Jake called an emergency meeting of all section chiefs to discuss the crisis. Representatives from each major species reported similar cases among their populations. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline biology, were showing the same symptoms as the water-breathing Aquarians. Even the energy-based luminoids were experiencing disruptions to their life force. The station's security chief raised the possibility that they were dealing with a biological weapon. The simultaneous outbreak across multiple species suggested artificial rather than natural causes. Fear began to spread through the station as word of the mysterious illness reached the general population. Helen Curtis attended the emergency meeting and immediately began discussing quarantine procedures and the need to protect the human population above all else. She suggested that humans should limit their contact with other species until the nature of the illness was understood. Amanda supported this position and recommended restricting access to the human section. Jake found himself thinking about Zara's background in xenobiology and wondered if her expertise might be helpful in understanding the crisis. When he mentioned this possibility, Amanda quickly pointed out that Zara's credentials had not been verified and that involving unqualified personnel could make the situation worse. Despite Amanda's objections, Jake decided to consult with Zara about the outbreak. He found her on the refugee ship helping to care for several humans who had begun showing similar symptoms. The illness had apparently spread to the human population as well, confirming that it affected all known life forms. Zara was studying the symptoms carefully and taking detailed notes about the progression of the illness. When Jake described what was happening throughout the station, her face grew grave. She told him that the pattern suggested something she had read about in her research, but hoped never to encounter. According to Zara, the symptoms matched those of an artificial pathogen designed to adapt to different biological systems. Such weapons had been developed during previous conflicts but were considered too dangerous to use because they could not be controlled once released. The fact that it was affecting such diverse species confirmed her worst fears. Jake immediately brought Zara to the medical center, despite Amanda's protests about involving unauthorized personnel. Dr. Klein was desperate enough to accept help from anyone with relevant knowledge and welcomed Zara's insights into the crisis. Zara worked alongside the medical team reviewing data and analyzing tissue samples from the affected patients. Her understanding of xenobiology allowed her to identify patterns that the traditional medical staff had missed. She began to piece together how the pathogen was adapting to target the essential life processes of each species. The breakthrough came when Zara realized that the pathogen was not actually changing itself, but was triggering each species' own immune system to attack healthy tissue. It was a diabolically clever design that used the victim's natural defenses against them. Working through the night, Zara and the medical team developed a treatment protocol that involved suppressing the immune response while supporting the body's basic functions. The approach was risky because it left patients vulnerable to other infections, but it was their only hope of stopping the artificial pathogen. Lucy had accompanied her father to the medical center and watched Zara work with obvious admiration. The 8-year-old brought Zara food and water when she forgot to take breaks and stayed by her side during the long hours of research. Jake was touched by his daughter's devotion to their friend. Amanda visited the medical center several times to check on the progress and each time questioned whether Zara's approach was sound. She pointed out that experimental treatments could make patients worse and suggested waiting for specialists from other human colonies to arrive. However, the situation was deteriorating too rapidly to wait for outside help. More species were being affected and the number of critically ill patients was growing by the hour. Jake made the decision to authorize Zara's treatment protocol, despite Amanda's objections. The first test of Zara's treatment was administered to a young Zephyrian who was near death. Within hours, the patient began to show improvement, and his crystalline structure started to regain its normal luminescence. Similar results followed with patients from other species as the treatment proved effective across different biologies. News of the successful treatment spread quickly through the station, and Zara found herself at the center of a coordinated medical response. She worked with teams from each species to adapt the treatment to their specific physiologies, and trained other medical personnel in the new protocols. Helen Curtis was forced to acknowledge Zara's contribution to solving the crisis, but remained skeptical about her background. She suggested that Zara might have had advanced knowledge of the pathogen and questioned whether her quick solution was suspicious rather than impressive. Jake found himself increasingly frustrated with Helen's constant attempts to undermine Zara despite the evidence of her competence and dedication. The crisis had revealed Zara's true character and abilities in ways that no amount of political maneuvering could dispute. As the outbreak was brought under control, Jake reflected on how differently Amanda and Zara had responded to the emergency. Amanda had focused on protecting human interests and maintaining proper procedures, while Zara had worked tirelessly to save lives, regardless of species. Lucy made her own observations about the crisis with the clarity that only children possess. She told her father that Zara cared more about helping sick people than about following rules, and that Amanda seemed more worried about being right than about people getting better. The successful resolution of the medical crisis established Zara as a valuable member of the station community despite her refugee status. Her expertise had saved countless lives and demonstrated the importance of cooperation between species in facing common threats. Jake realized that the crisis had revealed something important about the people around him. When faced with a genuine emergency, Zara had risen to the challenge while Amanda had focused on political considerations. The contrast made Jake question his assumptions about what qualities were truly important in a partner. The medical emergency had also shown Jake how naturally Zara fit into his and Lucy's life. She had worked alongside them during the crisis with no thought for her own safety or comfort. Her dedication to helping others regardless of their species embodied the best qualities of humanity. As the station began to return to normal, Jake found himself seeing Zara in a new light. She was not just a refugee in need of help, but a capable scientist and a caring person who had proven herself under pressure. The few coins he had given her had led to something much more valuable than either of them had expected. 3 days after meeting Zara, Jake received an unexpected visit from Helen Curtis, the station's human administrative coordinator. Helen was a sharp woman in her 50s who had built her career on making the right connections and advancing human interests through careful political maneuvering. She rarely visited Jake's office unless she had something important to discuss. Helen settled into the chair across from Jake's desk and got straight to business. She had been watching Jake's interactions with the refugees and wanted to discuss what she called a beneficial arrangement for everyone involved. Jake listened politely as Helen explained her concerns about his growing involvement with the refugee situation. According to Helen, the refugee problem was temporary and would resolve itself within a few weeks when the survivors found passage to other human colonies. What worried her was that Jake seemed to be forming personal attachments that might cloud his judgment about larger political issues affecting human interests. On the station, Helen then surprised Jake by mentioning her niece Amanda Curtis, who had recently arrived at the station as part of a diplomatic mission. Amanda was a military liaison officer with an impressive record and connections throughout the human colonial government. Helen thought it would be beneficial for Jake to meet Amanda and perhaps develop a professional relationship. Jake found himself uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Helen was clearly suggesting something more than a professional acquaintance, and Jake had no interest in being set up with anyone regardless of their qualifications or connections. He tried to politely deflect Helen's suggestions, but she persisted. The next day, Helen arranged for Amanda to visit Jake's office on official business. Amanda was an attractive woman in her early 30s, with short blonde hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. She dressed impeccably and spoke with the precise diction of someone who had received the best education available. Amanda's visit was ostensibly about coordinating security protocols for future refugee arrivals, but the conversation quickly expanded to broader topics. She asked Jake about his background and his plans for advancing within the colonial administration. Her questions were intelligent and showed she had done her homework about his career. During their meeting, Amanda mentioned that she had heard about Jake's daughter and said she looked forward to meeting Lucy. However, when Lucy actually appeared at the office door, Amanda's greeting was polite but clearly perfunctory. She smiled and made appropriate comments but quickly returned her attention to Jake. Jake noticed that Amanda seemed uncomfortable around children and made no real effort to connect with Lucy. When Lucy tried to show Amanda one of her drawings, Amanda glanced at it briefly and said it was very nice before turning back to her conversation with Jake. Lucy's face fell at the dismissive response. Over the following week, Helen arranged several social events that brought Jake and Amanda together. Amanda was undeniably intelligent and accomplished with strong opinions about military strategy and colonial politics. She spoke knowledgeably about trade agreements and had valuable insights into the complex relationships between different human settlements. However, Jake found their conversation somewhat one-sided. Amanda was clearly interested in his position and his potential for advancement, but showed little curiosity about him as a person. She asked about his military record and his plans for the future, but never inquired about his interests or his life outside of work. Amanda's attitude toward Lucy remained polite but distant. She would acknowledge the child when necessary, but never engaged her in conversation or showed any genuine interest in what Lucy had to say. When Lucy tried to include Amanda in games or activities, Amanda would decline with excuses about work, responsibilities. Meanwhile, Zara had begun visiting the human section regularly to help with various projects. She had volunteered to assist with the children's education program and had proven to be an excellent teacher. Her background in xenobiology made her particularly valuable in helping human children understand and appreciate the diverse species they encountered on the station. Jake watched as Zara interacted with Lucy and the other children with natural warmth and genuine interest. She remembered details about each child's interests and abilities and tailored her teaching methods to help them learn most effectively. The children clearly adored her and looked forward to their time with her. The contrast between Amanda's and Zara's approaches to children became increasingly apparent to Jake. While Amanda treated Lucy as an obligation to be managed, Zara treated her as an interesting person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. The difference in Lucy's responses to the two women was dramatic. Helen grew increasingly frustrated as she watched Jake spending more time with Zara and less attention on Amanda. She began making pointed comments about the importance of building relationships with the right people and the potential consequences of associating too closely with refugees who had no permanent place on the station. During a private conversation, Helen warned Jake that his reputation was becoming associated with the refugee situation in ways that might not serve his long-term interests. She pointed out that refugees came and went, but the relationships he built with established colonial officials would determine his future advancement opportunities. Helen also began spreading subtle rumors about Zara's background and motivations. She suggested to other human residents that refugees often exaggerated their qualifications, and that someone claiming to be a scientist might actually be seeking to exploit the generosity of established colonists. Amanda joined these efforts by questioning Zara's credentials during conversations with Jake. She pointed out that anyone could claim to have been a xenobiologist, and that refugee situations often attracted people who were not what they seemed to be. Her comments were always phrased as reasonable concerns rather than direct accusations. Despite these pressures, Jake found himself increasingly drawn to Zara's company. Their conversations ranged from scientific topics to philosophy, to their shared experiences raising children in challenging circumstances. Zara was intelligent and thoughtful, with a perspective on life that Jake found refreshing. Lucy made her preferences clear through her behavior rather than words. She would light up when Zara arrived and become quiet and withdrawn when Amanda was present. The 8-year-old had no interest in political considerations and responded purely to how each woman treated her. Jake began to realize that Helen's well-meaning matchmaking was based entirely on political calculations rather than personal compatibility. Amanda might be able to advance his career, but she showed no signs of being able to make him or Lucy happy. The gap between professional suitability and personal connection became increasingly obvious. The situation came to a head during a dinner party Helen organized at her quarters. Amanda spent the evening discussing military promotions and colonial politics, while Zara helped Lucy with a science project she had been working on. The contrast between their priorities could not have been more clear. As Jake watched the two women that evening, he found himself questioning what he really wanted from life. Career advancement was important, but not at the expense of his daughter's happiness or his own peace of mind. Helen's political calculations made sense on paper, but ignored the human elements that actually mattered. Late that night, as he tucked Lucy into bed, she made a comment that stayed with Jake for hours afterward. She said that Amanda reminded her of the teacher at her old school, who was very smart but never seemed to actually like children. The innocent observation cut straight to the heart of Jake's growing concerns about the arrangement Helen was promoting. Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of Kepler Station, watching ships come and go like metal birds in the black void of space. The trading post buzzed with activity as dozens of alien species conducted their daily business in the massive corridors below. Jake had been the human representative here for 3 years now, and still found himself amazed by the diversity of life forms that called this place home. His 8-year-old daughter Lucy tugged at his uniform sleeve and pointed at a strange purple creature with 6 arms haggling with a tall blue being over some glowing crystals. Lucy loved watching the aliens and had made friends with several of the younger ones who worked in the station shops. Jake smiled as he watched her wave at a small green alien child who waved back enthusiastically. The human section of Kepler Station was modest compared to some of the larger alien quarters, but it served their needs well. Jake commanded a small crew of 30 humans who maintained their section and helped coordinate trade agreements. Most importantly, they provided a safe haven for human ships traveling through this part of the galaxy. Today felt different, though. Jake had received word that a refugee ship was approaching the station. The ship carried survivors from the outer colonies that had been destroyed in a recent conflict between two alien empires. Humans had tried to stay neutral, but their colonies often got caught in the crossfire of wars they had nothing to do with. Lucy pressed her face against the viewing window as a battered ship approached the docking bay. The vessel looked like it had seen better days, with scorch marks along its hull and makeshift repairs visible even from this distance. Jake felt his heart tighten as he thought about the families aboard that ship who had lost everything after. The ship docked. Jake made his way to the arrival bay to greet the refugees. Protocol required him to check their documentation and ensure they had sufficient resources to stay at the station. What he found when he arrived broke his heart. Nearly 200 humans emerged from the cramped ship looking tired and defeated. Many carried only small bags containing their remaining possessions. Children clung to their parents while older folks moved slowly, as if every step required great effort. Jake had seen refugees before, but the sheer number of people who had lost their homes never failed to affect him deeply. Among the crowd, a young woman approached him hesitantly. She looked to be in her late 20s with brown hair pulled back, in a simple ponytail and clothes that had seen too many washings. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she carried herself with dignity and spoke clearly when she addressed him. Her name was Zara, and she explained that she had been chosen to speak for the refugees because she had some education and could communicate well with station officials. She told Jake that most of their group had very little money left after paying for passage to the station. The conflict had destroyed their homes so quickly that few people had time to gather valuable possessions. What worried Zara most was that several children aboard their ship had fallen ill during the journey. The ship's medical supplies had run out days ago, and the children needed medicine urgently. She had checked the prices at the station's medical center and found them far beyond what the refugees could afford. Jake listened as Zara explained their situation with quiet desperation in her voice. She was not asking for charity, but she clearly had no other options. The medicine the children needed would cost 50 credits, and the refugees had managed to pool together only 20 credits among all 200 of them as Zara spoke. Jake found himself studying her face. Despite her circumstances, she maintained eye contact and spoke with intelligence and grace. She was clearly educated and had probably held a good position before the war destroyed her world. Now she was reduced to begging for help to save children, who were not even her own. Lucy had followed her father to the arrival bay and stood quietly beside him, listening to every word. When Zara finished explaining their situation, Lucy tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered that they should help the sick children. Jake was already reaching for his credit chip before his daughter spoke. Without hesitation, Jake transferred 50 credits to Zara's account. Her eyes widened in surprise and gratitude flooded her face. She tried to thank him, but Jake waved away her words and said that helping each other was what humans did. He asked Lucy if she wanted to come with them to the medical center to make sure the children got the help they needed. The three of them walked through the station's corridors toward the medical bay. Along the way, Lucy peppered Zara with questions about Earth and the colonies and what it was like living on different worlds. Zara seemed surprised by the child's curiosity, but answered each question thoughtfully. Jake noticed how patient Zara was with Lucy's endless questions. Most adults grew tired of 8-year-old chatter quickly, but Zara seemed genuinely interested in what Lucy had to say. When Lucy showed her a drawing she had made of the station, Zara studied it carefully and praised the details the child had included. At the medical center, Zara purchased the needed medicine and arranged for a doctor to visit the refugee ship. The alien medical staff were efficient but impersonal in their treatment of the humans. Jake could see that Zara was frustrated by their lack of understanding about human physiology, but she remained polite throughout the interaction. As they prepared to return to the refugee ship, Lucy asked if she could see where Zara and the other people were staying. Jake hesitated because refugee accommodations were usually cramped and depressing, but Zara invited them to visit if they wanted to see how the families were managing. The refugee ship was exactly as Jake had feared. Families had been forced to share tiny spaces with barely enough room to lie down. The air recycling system worked, but the atmosphere felt heavy and stale. Children who should have been playing were listless and quiet while adults tried to make the best of impossible circumstances. Lucy's eyes grew wide as she saw how many people were crowded into such small spaces. She stayed close to her father but listened carefully as Zara introduced them to several families. Despite their circumstances, the refugees were polite and grateful for Jake's help with the medicine. What struck Jake most was how the refugees looked to Zara for guidance and comfort. She was clearly not the oldest or most experienced person among them, but they trusted her judgment and relied on her to communicate with station officials. She had somehow become their unofficial leader through her combination of intelligence and genuine care for others, as they prepared to leave the ship. Lucy quietly asked her father if there was more they could do to help. Jake promised to look into options for the refugees but privately wondered what resources the station could provide. Kepler Station operated on strict economic principles, and charity was not usually part of the equation. Walking back to their quarters, Jake found himself thinking about Zara and the strength she had shown in such difficult circumstances. He had met many people during his time at the station, but few had impressed him as much as this refugee woman who put the needs of children before her own pride. The tension on Kepler Station reached a breaking point the day before the colonial officials were scheduled to arrive. Helen Curtis had spent weeks orchestrating what she believed would be the perfect introduction between Jake and the visiting dignitaries, with Amanda prominently featured as his partner and future wife. Helen had arranged a formal reception in the station's main hall, where all the human residents would gather to meet the colonial officials. She had made it clear to Jake that this event would determine his future prospects, and that every detail of his presentation would be scrutinized and reported back to the highest levels of the colonial administration. Amanda had spent the morning helping Jake review his presentation materials and coaching him on the proper protocol for interacting with senior officials. She had also selected his formal uniform and suggested appropriate topics of conversation that would showcase his leadership abilities and political awareness. What Helen had not anticipated was Lucy's growing distress at the way Zara was being treated by the adult community. The 8-year-old had watched with confusion and anger as people who had previously been friendly to Zara began to avoid her and make unkind comments. Lucy had tried to talk to her father about what was happening, but Jake had been distracted by the pressure of preparing for the official visit. When she asked why people were being mean to Zara, he had given her vague answers about adult complications that she was too young to understand. The child's frustration reached its peak when she overheard Helen talking to another resident about the importance of Jake making the right choice for his future. Helen had said that refugees like Zara were temporary problems that should not be allowed to interfere with long-term planning. Lucy did not fully understand the political implications of what she had heard, but she understood that Helen was trying to hurt someone she loved. The injustice of the situation was clear to her, even if the adult reasoning behind it was confusing. On the morning of the reception, Lucy made a decision that would change everything. She had been excluded from the formal event because Helen considered children inappropriate for such an important occasion. However, Lucy had no intention of allowing the adults to make decisions about her life without her input. As the reception began in the main hall, Lucy slipped away from her assigned caretaker and made her way to where the adults were gathering. She had put on her best dress and carefully brushed her hair because she wanted to look proper for what she was about to do. The main hall was filled with human residents dressed in their finest clothes and several alien dignitaries who had come to observe the proceedings. The colonial officials had arrived early and were mingling with the crowd while Helen orchestrated introductions. Jake stood near the center of the room with Amanda at his side as Helen presented them to the visiting officials. Amanda was in her element discussing policy matters and making connections with the influential visitors. To outside observers, they appeared to be the perfect colonial couple. Lucy entered the hall quietly and moved through the crowd until she reached the center where her father was standing. The adults were so focused on their important conversations that most of them did not notice the small figure making her way toward them. When Lucy reached the group, she waited politely for a break in the conversation before speaking. However, when no such break came, she decided that politeness was less important than honesty. In a clear voice that carried across the nearby area, she made her announcement. "I like Zara more than any of those women who only pretend to care about me," Lucy declared loudly enough for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. The conversations around her stopped as adults turned to stare at the small girl who had interrupted their formal proceedings. Helen's face went white with shock and embarrassment. She had spent weeks planning this event to showcase Jake and Amanda as the ideal colonial family, and Lucy's outburst had destroyed the carefully constructed image in a single sentence. Amanda looked mortified as she realized that Lucy had publicly rejected her in front of the most important people in the colonial administration. Her political instincts told her that recovering from this kind of public humiliation would be extremely difficult. Jake felt his heart sink as he saw the disappointment and anger on Helen's face. He knew that Lucy's words had probably ended any chance he had for advancement within the colonial system. At the same time, he felt a surge of pride at his daughter's courage in speaking her truth. The colonial officials exchanged glances as they processed what the child had said. They had come to evaluate Jake's suitability for promotion and had not expected to witness a family drama that revealed deep divisions in his personal life. Lucy was not finished with her announcement. Looking directly at the colonial officials, she continued in the same clear voice that had commanded attention throughout the hall. She explained that Zara was the one who helped her with homework and read stories to her when she was sad. Zara remembers my birthday and knows what foods I like and listens when I tell her about my dreams, Lucy said, with the honesty that only children possess. The other ladies just smile and then talk to Daddy about boring things and act like I'm not even there. The adults in the hall began to murmur among themselves as they processed the implications of what Lucy had said. Some were embarrassed by the child's public rejection of their carefully planned social arrangements, while others seemed impressed by her courage. Helen tried to salvage the situation by suggesting that children often had unrealistic preferences and should not be taken seriously when important decisions were being made. She attempted to redirect the conversation back to the official business that had brought everyone together. However, Lucy was not finished speaking her mind. With the fearless honesty of childhood, she looked directly at Helen and asked why adults thought it was okay to be mean to good people just because they did not have important jobs or fancy clothes. Zara is smart and kind, and she saved lots of people when everyone was sick. Lucy continued her impromptu speech. She teaches us about planets and aliens, and she never gets mad when we ask too many questions. Why do you want Daddy to like someone who doesn't even like kids? The colonial officials found themselves in the unexpected position of witnessing a child's perspective on the political maneuvering they had come to observe. Lucy's words revealed the human cost of the adult games being played around her. Jake realized that his daughter had cut through all the political posturing and social expectations to express a simple truth. She preferred the person who treated her with genuine care and respect over the person who offered political advantages, but no emotional connection. Amanda made one last attempt to recover from the situation by suggesting that children needed guidance from adults who understood the complexities of the world. She pointed out that 8-year-olds were not qualified to make decisions about important matters. Lucy looked at Amanda with the serious expression that children use when they are trying to be very clear about something important. I know who is nice to me and who is just pretending, she said simply. Zara is nice for real, and you're only nice when grown-ups are watching. The accuracy of Lucy's observation was apparent to everyone in the hall. Amanda's careful politeness toward the child had been exposed as the superficial performance it was. In contrast, Lucy's description of Zara revealed a relationship based on genuine affection and mutual respect. The colonial officials were experienced enough to recognize that they had witnessed something significant. A child's honest assessment of the adults in her life had revealed truths that political presentations could not capture. Jake looked down at his daughter with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Lucy had spoken her truth with a courage that many adults lacked, but her words had also disrupted the careful plans that others had made for their future. The reception continued, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Lucy's intervention had forced everyone to confront the difference between political convenience and genuine human connection. The child's wisdom had exposed the adult's schemes and created a moment of truth that could not be ignored. As Jake processed what had just happened, he realized that his 8-year-old daughter had solved a problem that had been tearing him apart for weeks. She had made the choice that he had been unable to make and had done so with a clarity that came from seeing the situation without political complications. The aftermath of Lucy's public declaration created ripples throughout the human community on Kepler Station. Jake found himself at the center of conversations he had never wanted to have, while trying to process the implications of his daughter's brave honesty. The colonial officials had been surprisingly understanding about the disruption to their formal reception. Admiral Patricia Barnes, the senior official, had actually seemed impressed by Lucy's courage and had made comments about the importance of family harmony in evaluating leadership potential. However, Helen Curtis was livid about what she saw as a complete disaster for human political interests on the station. She blamed Jake for allowing his personal feelings to compromise his professional responsibilities and accused him of failing to properly prepare his daughter for such an important event. Amanda had maintained her composure during the remainder of the reception, but Jake could see that she was deeply hurt by Lucy's public rejection. Her pride had been wounded and her political calculations had been exposed as emotionally hollow. The days following the reception, Jake found himself reflecting on what Lucy had revealed about the relationships in their lives. His daughter had seen through the adult complications to identify the people who genuinely cared about her welfare, versus those who saw her as an obstacle to be managed. Zara had been absent from the reception because Helen had made it clear that refugees were not welcome at formal events. When Jake told her about Lucy's speech, Zara was moved to tears by the child's loyalty, but also concerned about the problems it might create for Jake's career. The situation reached a new crisis point when the station's research department formally offered Zara a permanent position as their xenobiology specialist. Dr. Raymond Torres, the department head, had been impressed by her work during the medical emergency and her ongoing contributions to interspecies relations. The job offer came with full credentials and permanent residency status on Kepler Station. It would give Zara the security and recognition she needed to build a new life after losing everything in the war. However, accepting the position would also make her a permanent part of the station community, rather than a temporary refugee. Helen immediately opposed Zara's appointment and demanded that Jake use his influence to block it. She argued that hiring refugees for important positions would set a dangerous precedent and encourage more displaced people to see the station as a permanent refuge. Amanda supported Helen's position and suggested that Zara's rapid advancement was suspicious. She questioned whether someone with her background could really be qualified for such an important role, and implied that personal relationships had influenced the hiring decision. Jake realized that he was facing the most important decision of his life. He could side with Helen and Amanda to block Zara's appointment and preserve his political standing within the colonial administration, or he could support the woman who had proven herself through her actions and risk his career prospects. The decision became more urgent when Helen presented Jake with an ultimatum. She had been in communication with the colonial officials, and they were prepared to offer Jake a promotion to sector commander if he demonstrated proper judgment in his personal relationships. According to Helen, the promotion would require Jake to relocate to a more prestigious assignment, where he would be responsible for multiple stations and thousands of personnel. It was the kind of opportunity that came along once in a career and would secure Lucy's future for generations. However, the promotion came with conditions. Jake would need to distance himself from controversial associations and present himself as a stable family man with appropriate connections. Helen made it clear that this meant ending his relationship with Zara and formalizing his partnership with Amanda. Amanda had been informed of the opportunity and was eager to accept the arrangement. She saw the promotion as validation of her own career strategy and believed that their partnership would benefit both of their ambitions. Jake asked for time to consider the offer, but Helen warned him that delays could be interpreted as lack of commitment. The colonial officials needed assurance that Jake could make difficult decisions when necessary and put duty before personal preferences. During this period of intense pressure, Jake spent long hours talking with Zara about their situation. She encouraged him to accept the promotion and told him that she would understand if he chose career advancement over their relationship. Zara's selfless response only reinforced Jake's growing realization that she represented everything he valued most about humanity. Her willingness to sacrifice her own happiness for his benefit demonstrated a character that no amount of political calculation could match. Lucy had been watching the adult drama unfold with the clear-eyed perception that children often possess. She could sense that her father was struggling with an important decision and that the outcome would affect their entire family. The child made her own contribution to the situation by asking Zara to help her with a school project about different alien species. As they worked together, Jake watched his daughter and the woman he loved collaborating with natural ease and mutual affection. Jake realized that his choice was not really between Zara and Amanda, but between two completely different ways of living his life. He could choose the path of political calculation and career advancement, or he could choose the path of genuine human connection and moral courage. The breakthrough came when Jake received word that several alien species had requested Zara specifically to help mediate a trade dispute that threatened to disrupt station operations. Her reputation for fairness and understanding had spread throughout the multi-species community. Watching Zara work with representatives from 5 different alien factions, Jake saw her true value to the station and to the cause of interspecies cooperation. She was not just a qualified scientist but a natural diplomat who could bridge differences that had seemed insurmountable. The successful resolution of the trade dispute demonstrated Zara's importance to station operations in ways that went far beyond her personal relationship with Jake. Her skills were needed by the entire community, and her contributions had real value for everyone. Helen's opposition to Zara's appointment began to look petty and short-sighted, in light of her obvious qualifications and proven track record. Even, some of Helen's allies began to question whether political considerations should override practical needs. Jake made his decision during a quiet evening with Lucy and Zara as they watched ships arrive and depart from the station's viewing lounge. He realized that he already had everything he needed for happiness, and that no promotion could improve on the life they had built together. The next morning, Jake informed Helen that he would not accept the promotion if it required him to abandon the people he loved. He told her that some things were more important than career advancement, and that his family's happiness was one of them. Helen was furious at what she saw as Jake's betrayal of his professional obligations. She warned him that refusing such an opportunity would end any chance for future advancement, and would mark him as unreliable in the eyes of senior officials. Jake accepted Helen's warnings with equanimity because he had found something more valuable than political success. He had discovered that true leadership meant standing up for what was right, rather than what was expedient. 6 months after Jake's decision to choose love over political advancement, Kepler Station had transformed into something unprecedented in the galaxy. The trading post had evolved from a simple commercial hub into a model of interspecies cooperation that attracted visitors and researchers from across known space. Zara's appointment as chief xenobiologist had proven to be one of the most successful personnel decisions in the station's history. Her natural ability to understand and communicate with different species had revolutionized how conflicts were resolved and agreements were negotiated. Under Zara's guidance, the station had established the first comprehensive interspecies cultural exchange program. Young beings from dozens of different worlds came to study alongside each other and learn about the rich diversity of life throughout the galaxy. Jake watched with pride as Zara addressed a gathering of alien ambassadors who had come to study the station's success in promoting peaceful cooperation. Her confidence and expertise had grown tremendously since her arrival as a desperate refugee seeking a few coins for medicine. The refugee ship that had brought Zara to the station had been converted into permanent housing for families who chose to make Kepler Station their home. The integration of the refugees into the station community had proceeded smoothly, with many of them finding meaningful work in various departments. Lucy had become the unofficial ambassador to young visitors from other species. Her natural curiosity and complete lack of prejudice made her the perfect guide for children who were experiencing their first contact with alien life forms. The 8-year-old had grown more confident and articulate under Zara's patient guidance. She spoke knowledgeably about different alien cultures and served as a translator. When language barriers created confusion between species, Jake's relationship with Zara had deepened into a true partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. They had married in a simple ceremony attended by representatives from every species on the station, creating a celebration that symbolized the unity they had helped build. Helen Curtis had eventually transferred to another assignment after it became clear that her political approach was incompatible with the new direction of station operations. Her replacement was a pragmatic administrator who valued results over political connections. Amanda had found her true calling in pure military command and had accepted a position leading security operations for the outer colonies. Her skills were better suited to tactical challenges than diplomatic ones, and she had discovered genuine satisfaction in her new role. The colonial officials who had initially pressured Jake to advance his career had been impressed by the station's transformation. Under his leadership, his unconventional approach to administration had produced results that traditional political methods could not match. Kepler Station had become a destination for diplomats and scientists who wanted to study successful interspecies cooperation. The waiting list for research positions had grown so long that the station was planning to expand its facilities to accommodate the demand. Jake often reflected on how different his life had become since that day when Zara had approached him asking for a few coins. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something that affected thousands of beings across multiple species. The success of the station's cooperative model had inspired similar projects throughout the galaxy. Other trading posts were adopting the cultural exchange programs and conflict resolution methods that Zara had developed. Lucy had started keeping a journal documenting the different species she met and the things she learned from each encounter. Her writings showed remarkable insight for someone so young and had attracted attention from xenobiologists throughout human space. Zara's research had expanded beyond practical applications to theoretical work on the evolution of cooperation between species. Her papers were being studied at universities throughout the galaxy and had established her as a leading expert in her field. The medical center that had once struggled with the artificial pathogen crisis had become a premier facility for treating patients from multiple species. The protocols Zara had developed during the emergency had been refined and were now used throughout the galaxy. Jake's decision to prioritize family and principles over career advancement had led to recognition he could never have achieved through political maneuvering. His leadership style was studied and emulated by administrators throughout the colonial system. The station's economic success had grown along with its reputation for cooperation. Species that had previously avoided each other were now engaging in profitable trade relationships facilitated by the cultural understanding programs Zara had created. Evening meals in the Morrison household had become opportunities for Lucy to practice her knowledge of alien customs and languages. She would demonstrate proper greetings for different species and explain the cultural significance of various traditions. Zara had established a scholarship program for refugee children who wanted to pursue scientific education. The program had already helped dozens of young beings begin careers in research and diplomacy. The viewing lounge where Jake and Lucy had first watched alien ships had been expanded into an observation deck that served as a gathering place for families from all species. Children who had never seen beings like themselves could watch their relatives arrive and depart. Jake's daily routine now included time spent mediating disputes and negotiating agreements between different factions. His reputation for fairness and his willingness to listen to all perspectives had made him a trusted arbitrator. Zara's work had revealed new possibilities for cooperation that nobody had previously imagined. Species with completely different biologies were finding ways to collaborate on projects that benefited everyone involved. The station's success had attracted the attention of the highest levels of government throughout known space. Jake had received offers for prestigious positions but had chosen to remain where he could continue building the community he loved. Lucy's birthday parties had become multicultural celebrations, featuring traditions from every species on the station. The events were so popular that they required careful planning to accommodate all the beings who wanted to participate. The few coins that Jake had given Zara on that first desperate day had become a symbol of the station's philosophy. A small display in the main hall commemorated that moment as the beginning of the transformation that had changed thousands of lives. Zara often told new arrivals about her first encounter with Jake and Lucy as an example of how individual acts of kindness could grow into something much larger. Her story had become part of the station's founding mythology. The success of their unconventional family had inspired other mixed relationships throughout the station. Beings from different species were learning to appreciate differences rather than fear them. Jake realized that his greatest achievement was not any professional recognition, but the happiness he saw in Lucy's eyes when she talked about her life on the station. His daughter was growing up in a world where diversity was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. The station's transformation had proven that cooperation was not only possible, but profitable for everyone involved. The economic benefits of peaceful coexistence had convinced even the most skeptical species to participate in the cultural exchange programs. As Jake tucked Lucy into bed each night, he would listen to her stories about the friends she had made and the things she had learned. Her experiences were preparing her for a future where interspecies cooperation would be the foundation of galactic civilization. The woman who had once needed just a few coins had become the architect of a new model for peaceful coexistence. Zara's journey from desperate refugee to respected leader demonstrated the potential that existed in every being when given the opportunity to contribute. Jake's choice to follow his heart, rather than political expediency, had created ripple effects that continued to spread throughout the galaxy. The station's success proved that humanity's greatest strength lay not in military might or economic power, but in the courage to do what was right regardless of personal cost. In the weeks following the medical crisis, Helen Curtis grew increasingly frustrated with what she saw as Jake's poor judgment regarding personal relationships. Despite Zara's obvious contributions to resolving the outbreak, Helen remained convinced that Jake was making a mistake by becoming too close to a refugee with no permanent status on the station. Helen began a subtle campaign to undermine Zara's growing reputation within the human community. During casual conversations with other residents, she would raise questions about Zara's background and suggest that refugees often exaggerated their qualifications to gain sympathy and support. The administrative coordinator pointed out that Zara's supposed expertise in xenobiology had never been independently verified. She noted that anyone could claim to have been a scientist before losing their documentation in a war zone. Helen suggested that Zara's quick solution to the medical crisis might have been lucky guesswork rather than genuine expertise. Amanda joined these efforts by questioning Zara's motives in conversations with Jake. She suggested that refugee women often targeted successful men as a way to secure their position and gain permanent residency. Her comments were always framed as concerns for Jake's welfare rather than personal jealousy. According to Amanda, Jake's growing attachment to Zara was affecting his judgment in ways that could damage his career prospects. She pointed out that colonial administrators were expected to maintain professional relationships and avoid entanglements that might compromise their objectivity. Helen arranged several social events designed to showcase Amanda's qualifications and connections while highlighting Zara's outsider status. During these gatherings, Amanda would discuss her military achievements and her family's influence within the colonial government, while Zara remained quiet about her own background. The political pressure intensified when Helen received word that senior colonial officials were planning to visit Kepler Station within the next month. She saw this as an opportunity to advance Amanda's relationship with Jake and position him for promotion to a more prestigious assignment. Helen made it clear to Jake that his behavior during the official visit would be closely observed and reported back to the colonial administration. She stressed the importance of presenting the right image and associating with people who enhanced rather than diminished his professional standing. Meanwhile, Zara had begun working with the station's research department on a volunteer basis. Her insights into interspecies cooperation had proven valuable in resolving several minor disputes between different alien factions. The research director had informally offered her a permanent position if she could obtain proper credentials. Jake watched as Zara threw herself into her work with the same dedication she had shown during the medical crisis. She spent long hours analyzing data and preparing reports that helped the station administrators better understand the complex relationships between different species. What impressed Jake most was that Zara never complained about her unofficial status or demanded recognition for her contributions. She seemed genuinely motivated by the opportunity to help others, rather than by personal ambition or the desire for advancement. Lucy had become Zara's constant companion during her work at the research center. The 8-year-old would sit quietly nearby doing her homework while Zara analyzed data or prepared presentations. Their easy companionship reminded Jake of how naturally Zara had fit into their lives. The contrast between Zara's humble dedication and Amanda's obvious ambition became increasingly apparent to Jake. While Amanda spoke constantly about advancement, opportunities, and political connections, Zara focused on the actual work that needed to be done. Helen's campaign against Zara reached a new level when she began spreading rumors about the refugees' true intentions. She suggested to several human residents that Zara might be using her relationship with Jake to gain access to classified information about station operations. The rumors were baseless, but they began to affect how some people treated Zara. A few residents who had previously been friendly became distant and suspicious. Jake could see that the social pressure was taking a toll on Zara, even though she tried not to show it. Amanda supported Helen's efforts by raising questions about security protocols during staff meetings. She suggested that giving refugees access to sensitive areas of the station might compromise operational security. Her concerns sounded reasonable on the surface, but Jake could see the personal motivation behind them. The situation became more tense when Helen discovered that Jake had been helping Zara prepare an application for permanent residency on the station. Helen was furious that Jake had taken such action without consulting her, and accused him of letting personal feelings cloud his professional judgment. During a heated private conversation, Helen warned Jake that his association with Zara was being noticed by important people throughout the colonial administration. She implied that his chances for promotion were being damaged by what others saw as an inappropriate relationship. Jake found himself caught between political pressure and his growing feelings for Zara. He could see that Helen and Amanda were working together to isolate Zara and force him to choose between his career and his personal happiness. The pressure campaign reached its peak when Helen arranged for Amanda to be assigned as Jake's official liaison for the upcoming visit from colonial officials. This gave Amanda a legitimate reason to spend more time with Jake and increased her visibility as his potential partner. Lucy became increasingly unhappy as she watched the adults around her engage in what she saw as unfair treatment of Zara. The 8-year-old could not understand why people who claimed to care about her father would try to hurt someone she loved. During this period, Zara began to withdraw from social activities within the human community. She could feel the changing atmosphere and did not want to cause problems for Jake or Lucy. Her natural pride made it difficult for her to accept that she was being targeted because of her relationship with them. Jake realized that he was facing a choice that would define not only his future, but also the kind of person he wanted to be. He could accept the political arrangement that Helen and Amanda were promoting and secure his career advancement. Or he could stand by the woman who had proven herself through her actions rather than her connections. The decision became more urgent when Helen informed Jake that the visiting colonial officials would expect to meet his family and assess his personal situation as part of their evaluation process. She made it clear that being associated with an unvetted refugee would not create a favorable impression. Amanda began spending more time with Jake under the pretense of preparing for the official visit. She helped him review protocols and procedures, while making subtle suggestions about how to present himself most favorably to the visiting dignitaries. During these preparation sessions, Amanda would make casual comments about their future together and the opportunities that would be available to them as a couple within the colonial administration. Her confidence in their eventual partnership was based on political calculation rather than emotional connection. Jake found himself increasingly uncomfortable with Amanda's assumptions about their relationship. While he could appreciate her intelligence and competence, he felt no emotional connection to her. Their conversations were professional rather than personal, and he could not imagine building a life with someone who treated his daughter as an inconvenience. The contrast with his relationship with Zara could not have been more stark. When he was with Zara, their conversations flowed naturally from serious topics to lighthearted banter. She made him laugh and challenged his thinking, while also providing emotional support during difficult times. Most importantly, Zara had formed a genuine bond with Lucy that went far beyond polite tolerance. She remembered details about Lucy's interests and fears and made time for the child even when she was busy with important work. Jake could see that his daughter was happier when Zara was around. As the date for the official visit approached, Jake realized that he could no longer avoid making a choice between political expediency and personal happiness. The decision would affect not only his own future but also Lucy's well-being and Zara's place in their lives.